slain.
One of the classic wonders. The most famous is never get involved in a land war in Asia, but only slightly less well known is this. Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
Hey there, how are you? It's been about a month. Strange things have been afoot here at Cheshire TV, where we shoot this program. I'm in a new studio. I'm in a new, to us, studio now. Thus, it's going to look a little different. We had to do a little something different for now with the show, and it may continue to evolve a little bit, as it has evolved from being two schmoes to just one schmo. I'm Mark. I am the Cinemaniac. You are a Cinemaniac if you watch this program. Thus, collectively and royally, we are the Cinemaniacs. So, we have a bunch of things to talk about. Since I've been away for so long, I'm actually leaving a bunch of things out, and we'll just talk about them when they hit video in a couple weeks. First up, we go... Do we? We go? We went? Hey, how are you? It's all new here. We go into the toy aisle. Actually, thematically, I organized it. We're going to the toy aisle this week in the theater. First up, we have the newest film in the Conjuring series of sort of, maybe, not really, possibly, if you construe things in a certain way based on a true story, tales of people and objects and things from beyond that make the world a worse place to live. This time, we have everybody's favorite, horrifyingly scary doll that they would never put on a shelf for a child. She's back, and the forces of evil are swirling around her in the early 70s when Annabelle comes home. Bah! Was that scary? Or are you just mad at me right now? So, like I always say, if I tickle you and you laugh, are you laughing because you thought it was funny, or is that just your body reacting involuntarily? I don't like much modern horror. I love horror movies. I hate horror movies. It's really a weird conundrum in that you're chasing the thrill. You want it to be good. Every time you want it to be good, 99% of the time it's not good. But when you find that one that is good, it's so, so sweet. And you get a movie like It Follows, or you get a movie like The Descent, or other relatively modern horror movies. I'm probably talking about movies that are 20 years old now, but to me it's modern. So I never really have liked the Conjuring movies. I always thought they were a lot of hooey, mostly jump scares. I don't find special effects funny. We'll get to other... I don't find special effects scary. I don't find jump scares scary. They're relatively well shot. They're generally set in a time period that I find more attractive than the current mainstream time period, so that's cool. This is set in like the mid-70s, so you get... The biggest thrill I had in Annabelle Comes Home was that the babysitter in this film played a Badfinger record. I'm a huge Badfinger fan, so to hear Badfinger in stereo surround was pretty cool, and they sort of remixed one of the songs a little. That was kind of cool. But otherwise, I just thought this was a sort of a tired old, a lot of the same tropes. I thought it was fairly dull. Quite literally, the best thing I can say about this movie, about the jump scares that happened every few minutes, were that they kept me from sleeping in through the entire film, because it's not the movie's fault. It was a very busy weekend. I was very tired, but honestly, I was falling asleep during the movie, and the extremely loud noises every once in a while did serve to wake me up so that I could continue watching the film. So basically the story here is you have Ed and Elaine Warren, who were a real couple, both passed away recently now, and they were paranormal investigators. They investigated the Amityville haunting and all sorts of other things, and these films are based on their case studies, theoretically, of paranormal investigations they did. So Annabelle was a real doll in a real case that they did, and I believe in reality it was a Raggedy Ann doll, but in the movies it's this ridiculously horrifying looking doll that, like I said, no company would manufacture a doll that looks like this, except now where people are manufacturing things for horror fans. So it's ridiculous. It's like the new It. To me, a regular clown is scarier than a clown that's all brrr. That's just, you're trying too hard. So anyway, this film is about Annabelle, this doll that's locked in a glass case in the Warrens' house, and it's locked there and blessed and protected from unleashing the spirits and evil that it attracts and all that. And the Warrens go off for a little holiday weekend somewhere, and they leave their daughter with a babysitter. Babysitter's friend comes over, unlocks the cabinet, and unleashes hell upon the house and the land. So basically it's people running away from ghosts and demons inside a house in the early 70s, and I just was kind of bored with it. The best thing I can say about it is that at some point, this may be a spoiler, sorry, at some point, literally the boy next door is coming over, and he is being chased by some kind of ghostly, foggy CGI dog demon or something. And then at one point, it looks like a werewolf. And I'm like, did they seriously bring a werewolf into these films? And later the kid refers to it as a werewolf, and I'm like, I mean, the whole concept is ridiculous, but to go from the world of ghosts and spirits to werewolves, that's kind of like what the Fast and the Furious movies are doing. They're going from movies about street racing to international espionage and super soldiers, and if they don't put the next one on the moon, I'm going to write an angry letter to the Times. Anyway, people do like the Conjuring films. I'm not one of them. But I think if you like the Conjuring films, you'll probably like this movie. This is like the third, I think, Annabelle-related film that has come out. It's certainly competently made. It doesn't do with all the shaky garbage that I hate, but it also does most things I don't like about modern horror. So that is out in theaters now if you choose to accept it. I didn't. So we will then whiffle on over here. Good. And we'll talk about another movie about an evil doll. This time we have a remake of the 80s classic Child's Play. Child's Play was originally about this little doll that was a bank robber, murderer, bad guy, was on the run from the police, and as he was dying, he sort of used voodoo to will his spirit into this little doll. Doll gets purchased, taken home to a cute kid, and starts wreaking evil doll havoc on the world. It started off as a somewhat serious movie, and as the sequels went on, they became comedies. Anyway, flash forward probably a disturbing number of years, and we have a new take on Chucky. This time, he is a smart doll. He's a Bluetooth doll. He's like an Alexa with legs and arms that controls all of your house and everything. And the downside to him controlling all your house and everything is that he's evil and he wants to kill people. So this is the latest take on a film entitled Child's Play. So you know me, if you've watched this program at all, not a fan of remakes. And yes, classic films have been remakes. The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing was a remake. I personally thought the Dawn of the Dead remake was quite good. I think 99.9% of remakes are dumb and pointless and get forgotten forever, and everybody just goes back to the originals. But they can be interesting and fun, mostly when they do something different and don't just retread. I'm not going to tip my hand as to what I thought about this movie quite yet, but I do give it credit for not being the exact same thing all over again. On the same hand, or the other side of that hand, I don't find technology scary. I find movies that try to hinge a story around a current technology to almost be dated by the time they come out. They seem silly in time. Maybe not everybody views films like me as a document that should last forever. A lot of times I think I say movies are like bubblegum for most people. It's enjoyable while the flavor lasts. As soon as that experience is over, you cast it aside, you never think about it again. So for a modern audience, maybe who doesn't know the original Child's Play or is up for another take on this, it's interesting. So Chucky, as I said, some conglomerate who makes, smart houses and smart TVs and smart pressure cookers and everything else, creates this doll that is also something that, it's like an Alexa. Basically, you can use it to control the rest of your house, which is an odd idea. So the way the film opens, I'm not going to give you too much about what happens in this, but the way the film opens is that a sweatshop worker in Vietnam who's being berated by his boss to work faster and harder is fired, and the boss says to him, just finish this doll, finish programming this doll, and then you're back on the street. So of course, this disgruntled guy basically turns off all the safety features on this doll. Now, why a doll would have safety features, I'm not sure. And there was a moment that at the time I thought was stupid, and the more I thought about it, it has to have been in there as a joke. He turns off the violence inhibitor. So this doll had to have something built into it to not try to kill people. So that's like that's what I was saying. It's like if you had an Alexa, it's turning off the racist language inhibitor. It shouldn't be there in the first place. But anyway, I think that was probably a joke. So anyway, this doll has all of its inhibitions turned off, and one by one it picks up some bad habits and just wants to be this little boy's friend and winds up killing a lot of people. Now, some of the kills are clever and amusing and gory and gross and fun, which I enjoyed. I will admit that, again, I did sleep through about half this movie. Now, it's not the movie's fault. I'm very tired. It's been a very crazy week getting all this place put together. So I can't wholeheartedly say that this was a terrible film. I didn't really dig it for the most part for what I saw of it. And the horror elements were fun, but the updating seemed kind of cheesy to me in many ways. Now, technology gone wrong, is that cheesier than voodoo? Probably not really. But I will say most people that I know who saw this film liked it, or at least said it wasn't as bad as they thought it would be. So there's that. Certainly not a film for kids, really a film for teens or people who like the original films, but it was amusing. It's the kind of movie that if I were to go to the drive-in and there was a movie I hadn't seen yet that I wanted to see, and this was the co-feature, I'd watch it again to see if I like it better the second time around. Once I think sometimes your expectations you go with certain expectations for a film and they might not be met and you're disappointed, but sometimes you can watch it again knowing that and it works better for you. So Child's Play may work better for me a second time. I don't know if this is going to do well enough to warrant more sequels like the original had. I kind of feel like this is, like all remakes, this is going to get forgotten, and what will happen is that you'll get more sequels to the original Child's Play. Mark Hamill does the voice of Chucky in this, which is very cool and is not, it's not aping the old Chucky voice, which I appreciated. The Chucky doll in this looks really weird and not cute, not scary, just weird, like cheap and weird. It was very, very odd to me. Anyway, Child's Play is in theaters, and I'm going to guess with what's coming out soon, probably not for much longer. So on to our last film that revolves around sentient playthings. This is the fourth film in a series that Pixar has had going for, when you do the math, quite a long time. We have Woody, and we have Buzz, and we have Bo Peep, and we have Mr. Potato Head, and we have all the characters from all these other films, plus a bunch of new ones that are a heck of a lot of fun. This time, they're out into the world on their own, trying to regain a former member of their gang that went astray. This is Toy Story 4. So I never saw Toy Story 3 until like 2 days before I saw Toy Story 4. The upside of working in the basement of a library, which we are now above ground, we now have windows again, is that I can go on my computer and say, hey, do they have Toy Story 4? They do. I'll be right back. I'm checking that out. So I watched Toy Story 3. Sorry, I meant Toy Story 3. I checked out of the library immediately before seeing this. And Toy Story 3 ends with Andy, the child who we followed through all these films, who owns these toys, basically growing up, going to college, and giving his toys away to this little neighborhood girl. Toy Story 3 is very, I'm not going to say it's a downer, but it's very emotional and very kind of sad overall. And it's the toys dealing with, you know, being abandoned or not being needed or loved anymore. So you wonder, where can another Toy Story sequel go? Well, now that these toys are with another owner who's a little kid, you actually can keep going with these. And it may seem unnecessary to keep making these films after that last part 3 seemed to bookend it, but I thought Toy Story 4 was excellent. These films, they delve into human emotion and rites of passage in life and just like human truths more than most films I see that star actual people in them. This one is about, you know, again, moving on to the next stage of your life. It's about, you know, welcoming new people into a group. It's about a lot of things. So basically the story, roughly, is the new little girl is going off to preschool or kindergarten for the first time. So she's leaving home and dealing with that change in life. And the toys are worried they're going to be left behind. And basically the little girl makes a new friend, which is this very weird spork character who's pretty hilarious. And then it becomes sort of a road movie where they get separated, and there's a lot to it. But there's a lot of scenes that take place in an antique store where you see these weird old toys that have been left behind. And at times, there's a sequence where Woody meets this little doll character and some ventriloquist dummies. And it is borderline like a legit horror moment. So it starts to lead towards something. It's done with humor, but it's legitimately creepy, and I thought that was really cool. And there's really good like action sequences. I always say some of the best action sequences these days are in kids' films. Toy Story 4 has some really good ones. It is legitimately very funny. It's very clever how they use toys that are either archetypal toys or toys that are actual manufactured toys that you've seen before, how they make fun of and play with the idea of how those toys work or how those toys have been known to break if you ever owned them and all that stuff. It's glorious to look at. I saw it in 3D. The 3D was pretty good here and there. As Pixar, you know, a lot of 3D now is, it's a normal film, they shoot it normally, and then somebody goes in afterwards in a computer and tries to put space and depth and rounds off the edges. With a movie like this, where it's all 3D models in a 3D environment done in a computer, I mean, it's 3D already. So the 3D was quite effective. I'd say if you really like Toy Story and you want a little bit extra to it, I would say good 3D is like surround sound. It just draws you into the story a little bit more and makes it feel like you're a part of it. The 3D in this was pretty good. No Pixar short before the film, like there usually is, but I will say to stick around because there are little additional bits as the credits progress that are pretty funny. I just thought Toy Story 4 was great. And I'm a grown-up type person, and I thought it was great. And I think the kids in the theater loved it, and the grown-ups seemed to like it. So you really can't go wrong with Toy Story 4 or any of the films in this series as far as I'm concerned. So that's all I'm going to talk about in the theater. There's a few other things I've seen. I'm kind of going to sprinkle those out over the next week or so if we can. I just wanted to get those three killers two murderers and one killer film out of the way. If you want to follow us on Facebook, follow me on Facebook, whatever. I do have a Facebook page for this fine program. I post the shows that we post to YouTube, so it's the entire episode minus the trailers, because YouTube won't let us do that. I'll post things about cool video sales online, movie news, cool events that are going on, film screenings, all kinds of stuff like that. Maybe the occasional short review if we're off the air for a while. Anyway, that's there should you choose to accept it, and it's a little value added in the content department. Now, we will move on to the part that I have been waiting for. That is that which is available on the home video platform, device, format, service, whatever of your choice. These are all Arrow Video or MVD or Blue Underground releases. This is the kind of stuff I like. This is the stuff that, this is the kind of stuff I like. So, first of all, we have a title from the MVD Rewind collection. These are sort of video store staples from the 80s and 90s. These are movies that most people who haunted a video store would recognize. These are mostly films that I recognize and never rented back then because they didn't look very good to me. But I'm having a good time discovering these movies 20 or 30 years later in these really, really nice presentations with a slipcase that looks like an old Media Home Entertainment release. This is an early Jean-Claude Van Damme film in which you get for your dime, nickel, or $5 bill, or $29.95, twice the Van Damme. This is Van Damme starring as twins, yes, separated at birth, who come together in 1991 Hong Kong. One is a squeaky clean aerobics instructor, one is a cigar chomping guy on the wrong side of the law, and together they deliver to you, the paying audience, a double impact. Double the Van Damme. So I was never a big Van Damme fan. I always liked Hard Target. I always thought that was the best movie he made. I remember when he was popular, I watched him on tape, I watched him on cable, and I always thought they just weren't very good. So popping this in, I was like, oh God, it's double impact, double the Van Damme. And I had a great time with this. This movie was so much fun. Predominantly set and shot in Hong Kong. If you're a fan of 90s Hong Kong movies and 80s Hong Kong movies like I am, they're action movies. A lot of familiar faces. Bolo Young, who's been in a ton of stuff. I believe he was in Bloodsport, but he was also in like Enter the Dragon and a ton of movies. He may have been the Chinese Hercules. Jeffrey Lewis, who's sort of now known as Juliette Lewis's dad, but I always remember Jeffrey Lewis from Salem's Lot and the Which Way movies and a ton of other stuff. So there's a lot of familiar faces. It's in English, despite being set in Hong Kong. The action is not dynamically shot, but you can see what's going on, and it's well choreographed, and it's fun. It's simple, but it's a hell of a lot of fun action-wise. It's very funny intentionally, and probably to a degree at this point watching it. This is from 91, so 30 years later. Somewhat unintentionally funny at times, but this kind of is the kind of movie that would be a blast watching with friends on a Friday or Saturday night with a pizza. And some extras on this too. First of all, it looks great. MVD knows what they're doing. And the extras are like there's making ofs and interviews and all kinds of stuff. I assumed this was going to be a trailer only thing because, I mean, frankly, it's double impact. But I was just like, wow, there's like actual content on this. So I had a really good time. I'm shocked to say this. I had a really good time with Double Impact, and I'm also doubly shocked to say I'm going to probably be keeping this one because this was a hell of a lot of fun. Twice as much fun as I expected it would be. There's even a scene in the beginning where Van Damme is demonstrating how to do a split. And my friends and I always used to laugh that all of his early films, they would bend over backwards, finding a way for him to spread his legs really, really wide. But in this, it's like the first sequence that you see him, and he's doing the split. So if you were wondering whether he does a split in this movie, yes, he does. Now, on to another company I do so love. This is, hi, how are you? This is Blue Underground. Bill Lustig's company. Bill Lustig, the director of Maniac and Vigilante and Uncle Sam and a bunch of other things. He formed this video company during the DVD boom called Blue Underground, and they really were devoted to releasing a lot of grindhouse stuff. I think it's sort of the stuff he used to see on 42nd Street back in the 70s and early 80s. Grindhouse stuff, horror movies, Italian crime films, all that kind of stuff. And now he's taking a lot of those releases that he put out on DVD, and he's giving them a major goose up to 4K and putting them out on Blu-ray in these really crazy deluxe editions. I mean, he did Maniac recently, and now he has this one, which is a film by Lucio Fulci, who you may or may not know, Italian director best known for Zombie and House by the Cemetery and many, many other sort of gory, sort of trashy horror films, and a couple of giallos and a couple of other things. This is the tale of a crazy, crazy killer who's going through the greater Big Apple area, just slicing and dicing them right up and making Donald Duck voice Donald Duck voices while he does it. That part doesn't quite jive with the rest, but he is known for heretofore and forevermore as the New York Ripper. Oh, the editing I will have just done to that trailer before you saw it. So, this is a very gratuitous film. This is chock full of nudity and profanity and gore and sexual content and everything that makes life worth living. And not for kids, as you know. If you know Fulci at all, you expect that it's going to be pretty gory, and he doesn't shy away from the unpleasantness in these films. In fact, it's what I call probing the wound films. I've never been a big Fulci fan because I always felt like his films were kind of slapdash, kind of crudely made, and the gore was just lingered upon to a ridiculous extent. So I generally don't care for his films. So I'd never seen this one. I'd always heard about it. It's pretty notorious, partly for the duck quacking killer and partly for just how grimy it is. And it really delivered on that, but I actually liked it for all those reasons. I really had a good time with this in terms of a good time watching people be killed. This is set in 1982, released in 82, so it's a 1982 New York, so it's still super sleazy and super grimy. Shot mostly here, but his international films, were the interiors were done somewhere in Italy, the exteriors were done in New York. And it's basically just a slasher movie. It's akin to Maniac in that it was just this person who's stalking and slashing, and the police are trying to find out who it is and stop them. And you've been there before, but it's got a really cool soundtrack, like Fulci's films usually do. This new transfer looks gorgeous. It looks like it was shot much more recently than 1982, and it's a 2-disc edition. So you've got the movie and all the extras on a DVD, you got the movie and all the extras on a Blu-ray, and you've got a soundtrack. The complete soundtrack is included. Comes with a nice lenticular cover, comes with a slipcase. It's a really, really nice package, and I would highly recommend it to Fulci fans or fans of this movie. Like all these releases I keep talking about, this is the kind of thing where it comes out and you can throw your previous versions away unless you have some sentimental attachment to it, because this has bested them all in picture, sound, and extras, and I think it ports over most of the extras that were done for the previous edition and then adds more on top of that. So New York Ripper is deplorable and grimy and disgusting and gross and gratuitous and wonderful all at the same time. That is out now from Blue Underground. So we move on to, now we're going to, I don't know if we even have the graphic anymore. I don't think we can do it right now. We go to the Arrow Video corner. These are films that are released by Arrow Video in the UK and the US. These are all US releases that I'm talking about. And we have a film from the late 80s shot in Wisconsin that was, on your video store shelf back then. And it tells the tale of a group of criminals who have escaped from prison, and they've kidnapped some people or held hostage some people. And they're out in the snowy wilderness, and they basically fall into a mine shaft, and they are, I'm not going to say it yet, they fall into a mine shaft, they're trying to survive, they're trying to escape, they're trying not to, turn on each other, and then the cannibal guy shows up and starts offing everybody. This was what happens when you don't pay attention where you were walking and you wind up trapped alive. So this is one where I think my preferences and predilections taint how I react to it. I'm not a 90s fan. I lived through it. It was fine to a degree. There's great stuff from that era in the late 80s, all that time. But I don't love the aesthetic of the late 80s into the 90s. And this movie is that. This was shot and released in 1988. Very, very low budget, done on a small studio in Wisconsin. To me, the story behind the movie is more interesting than the movie itself. So it has that look. It's sort of that flat, kind of overlit a lot of the time, the fashion, the music, cheesy keyboard score that I don't really like. So I didn't really like this. This is, to me, it's more of a crime thriller and drama than it is horror, or it starts off as that and it eventually becomes like a horror movie when the cannibal guy shows up. I didn't find the acting terribly good, and it's all sort of regional actors and things. I didn't find it technically very interesting, and there's a moment at the end where there's a soliloquy where this certain character goes on and on about something that was so cheesy and bad that it was funny. But I just didn't get into this movie at all. I'd never really heard of it. I had to look up to see if, this is one where sometimes I'll look it up online and I'll find the original video box cover and I'll be like, oh yeah, that movie that I never rented back then. It looks fantastic, and this is one occasion, which I don't usually agree with, where I think perhaps an old crappy video transfer might have done this movie more favors than the Arrow gorgeous treatment, because I think it would have softened the edges of how cheap the sets were and how small the sets were, and the creature makeup and everything might have come off a little better if you didn't quite see it in such good detail. Because it's Arrow, this looks fabulous. You've got a commentary, you've got new interviews with the people who were the creative team behind the film and some of the actors. You've got a vintage documentary that was done by a local TV station about the making of the film and this new film studio that had popped up in Wisconsin to try to get a film industry out there. All of that to me is more interesting than the film was. So maybe you're a fan of Trapped Alive from the old video days, and this is an amazing gift you've been given from Arrow to get a treatment like this of a pretty obscure movie. Maybe you love late 80s, early 90s horror and that feel, whether you actually legit like it or you think it's funny. That probably would work for you, but it just really didn't work for me. So this is one of the kind of rare Arrow releases that I wasn't really into, but your mileage may vary. So now we swing back on over to another Arrow release. It's all Arrow from the rest of the way here. And this is another giallo film. Eurocrime, giallo, Edgar Wallace kind of movie. Stars Klaus Kinski as a man whose wife dies in a car accident, and he's sort of upset to a degree about that, and then he finds that he sees somebody who looks a lot like her somewhere, and he starts to pursue this, and it becomes this weird obsessive mystery. And did he really see somebody that looked like his wife? Is his wife really dead? Is somebody blackmailing him? What's going on when you run into what can only be described as a double face? So that was the wrong clip, but I'm going to carry on, because unless somebody tells you that something is wrong, you don't know it's wrong. But I just told you, so guess what? Something went wrong. So I introduced the wrong film out of order. That was a clip for a movie that Arrow has just released entitled The Running Man, not the Schwarzenegger film. This is an earlier film directed by Carol Reed, who did The Third Man, which you may have heard of. And it's a really fun, interesting, I would say noir if it was shot in black and white, but it wasn't. This is 1963. You have Lawrence Harvey, who is in The Manchurian Candidate and The Naked Prey and a lot of other films. You have Lee Remick, who is in many films, and you have Alan Bates. So the deal here is Lawrence Harvey is not a cool guy. He's not a nice guy. He's maybe in debt, maybe on the run, maybe wanted for some things. So he basically, with the help of his wife Lee Remick, he fakes his death and he runs off to Spain and assumes another identity. She follows him after the fact, after things have cooled down a little, and the idea is they're going to meet each other in Spain and get married again, her having the insurance money, and all will be well. That's a really good plan until Alan Bates shows up. Alan Bates is an insurance investigator who had talked to the grieved widow Remick earlier, and now just happens to run into her and this other guy in Spain. So it's this wonderful cat and mouse game of trying to pull off this plot that they have without this guy who's, the authorities finding out about it. Shot in Spain in the early 60s, so it is gorgeous, and it's beautifully photographed, and the locations are amazing, and the interior and exteriors are amazing. And this was a really fun movie that I'd never heard of before. It's not, one of the great films of all time, but this is the kind of stuff that I love Arrow for, is they dig up these films I'd never heard of. This film, doomed to have the same title as a Schwarzenegger film that we all know. So it's always going to be like, no, not that Running Man. But this is really cool. Fun extras that illuminate Carol Reed as a director and his legacy. There's a long interview with Lee Remick sort of about her career that was done, I believe, in the 70s or 80s. That's an audio-only thing. And there's it's not voluminous extras, but enough to give you a bit more insight about the film and the people behind it and just sort of where its place in the world was or is. So I quite enjoyed The Running Man. It's cool. This is sort of fits in with the noir releases that Arrow have been doing for a while. So now we're going to talk about the movie that I just already introduced again. So this is that Klaus Kinski film I was talking about, where he thinks his wife is dead and he sees somebody who looks like his wife and he's chasing after this person. Is he crazy? Is somebody trying to drive him crazy? Or is she really not dead? And the film, once again, is entitled Double Face. Hi, how are you? So this is, as I said earlier, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know, earlier. This is sort of a giallo, Edgar Wallace, crimi, Eurocrime, thriller kind of movie. Hard to quite pin down. I wouldn't necessarily call it a giallo. But you have Klaus Kinski as a good guy, for a change, not as a maniac. And he is just trying to figure out, what the heck is going on with this woman that looks like his wife. It's interesting. It's very twisty, turny, very sort of dark mystery kind of thing. Set in Europe, so as I like to say, the clothes, the cars, the houses, the people are all interesting looking and gorgeous. And it's just this fascinating tale of, is he being driven crazy, which is a lot like a lot of giallo films. Who's behind this and what is the deal? It's a mystery. So ultimately you find out what the deal is. This transfer looks beautiful. This looks, again, like a film not shot in 1969, but a film that somehow could have been shot a week ago, thanks to Arrow and their restoration. Voluminous extras, as I love with these giallo films, or again, not really giallo, but that tell you all about, when this film was made, where it falls in the body of work for the filmmaker, which was, I believe, Ricardo Freda, who did Horrible Dr. Hitchcock and The Ghost, and one I reviewed a few weeks back, The Iguana with the Tongue of Fire. So somebody who'd made a lot of Euro horror type films. And you just get a lot more info about these people and who made it and why, which I love. It takes me a long time to get through them all. It's like, you watch the movie and it's an hour and a half, and the extras are like 5 hours worth of goodies if you're into that sort of thing, which I am. So the Double Face is out now on video. It is a wonderful complement to the other Euro crime thrillers that Arrow has been putting out. I liked it quite a bit, and as I like to say, I'll be keeping this one. So another thing we have with Arrow, this is actually a 3-film set. This is the second volume in a series, hopefully of many more volumes, that Arrow has been putting out, that Stephen Thrower, British author who did a book called Nightmare USA, which was a big, thick, gigantic book about regional American horror films from the 70s, 80s. He has taken that knowledge and is now curating this series of releases for Arrow, and he appears in the extras and tells you more info about them, along with a bunch of other people. And this is 3 films. It is a film called Dark August from 1976, which was shot in Vermont. It is a film entitled The Child from 1977, which was shot in California. That's had some other releases before. And a film entitled Dream No Evil from 1970. All interesting, odd regional horror films under the umbrella title in this package of The American Horror Project Volume 2. So we're running short on time. I'm going to be fast about this. So I did not really care for the films in the first set of American Horror Project, and I really didn't care for these that much. They're very non-traditional horror films. They're very obtuse, arty, thinking persons of horror, very strange and dreamlike. Dream No Evil was very dreamlike and strange. Dark August I thought was actually kind of just dull and didn't really feel much like a horror movie. The Child I liked the most, probably because I'm a simpleton, and it felt the most like a horror movie to me, and it had some legitimately creepy moments toward the end. Whether I like them or not, these films have a following. These people, it is amazing that these things are getting this kind of treatment. These are very, very deluxe editions of these films. They look amazing. They've been amazingly restored, and the extras are hours and hours and hours. It was funny to pop this in and see 2 friends of mine in the extras. Chris Pajali is on one of them, and Steve Bissett is on another, talking about the filmmakers and the history of Steve is Vermont filmmaking, and Chris is more about the history of the filmmakers for what was that called? Dream No Evil. And The Child had been put out on video before from Something Weird and some other places. Anyway, I want to move along. American Horror Project Volume 2, very, very outstanding set. If you like these films, or if you're curious about these films, this is like an educational tool for horror historians as far as I'm concerned, even though I didn't particularly like the films. Now, I'm going to do a very quick intro. We're going to go right to the trailer. This is a trailer for a movie from 1978 about a wacky, wild radio station that is not WKRP, and them trying to struggle against the corporate man with a soundtrack that you cannot believe they could put in one film. This is FM. So I don't know if they picked songs that were already hits when the movie came out in 78, or if they were psychics, but out of like the 20 songs on the soundtrack to this film, I think I hadn't heard of maybe 2 of them. They're all like stone cold classics. So you have a great cast. You have Martin Mull, you have Eileen Brennan, you have Cleavon Little, and some other folks, all as wacky radio DJs dealing with this radio station that's about to be, or that's owned by a corporate overlord who's trying to skew them into a more mainstream direction. And it's very KRP, and I love KRP. I don't know, I just looked it up. KRP came out in 78. This movie came out in 78. I don't know what came first, but to me this feels like if you did a KRP movie, made it a little bit more serious, this is what you would get. FM, it is funny. The cast is great. They work together great. The music is outstanding. There's a great Linda Ronstadt concert sequence and a Jimmy Buffett concert sequence, and you see Tom Petty in the studio a little bit promoting like his first album. I totally love this movie. Loaded with extras, interviews with some of the cast. I believe there's a commentary. There's all kinds of stuff about the making of and where this film came from. I thought it was outstanding. It's been on video before, but it's never been on video looking and sounding as amazing as this with these extras. So I highly recommend FM, especially if you're a KRP fan. That's out now from Arrow Video. We're running very short on time, so I'm going to say see you later. I will be back, in 2 weeks with even more breathless wrap-up of stuff. And until then, I am Mark, I am the Cinemaniac, and I will see you at the movies. Bye.